Ladies and gentlemen, there is a truth many of us overlook in this noisy, busy, demanding world. Being alone is not weakness, it is power. Too often, we have been taught to believe that solitude means loneliness, that if you are not surrounded by people, you are somehow incomplete, unworthy, or unloved. But let me tell you something that can change your life. The moments you spend alone are the very moments you meet the truest version of yourself. When you strip away the noise of the world, when you step back from the endless distractions and constant voices that tell you who you should be, what you should do, and how you should live, you are left with something rare and powerful, the chance to hear your own voice. Solitude is not about escaping life or people. It is about finally meeting yourself in the deepest, most authentic way. Too many people spend their lives surrounded by others, yet feel completely disconnected from who they truly are. They lose themselves in relationships, in social media, in the endless pursuit of fitting in, and because of that, they forget what they actually want, what they truly believe, and what really matters to them. Being alone creates the space to remember. In solitude, you start to notice the things you've been ignoring. You begin to hear the quiet whisper of your intuition, the one that gets drowned out when you're constantly surrounded by noise. That whisper holds your truth. It tells you when you're in the wrong place, when you're giving too much of yourself away, and when you're living beneath your potential. The problem is, most people never give themselves permission to hear it. They run from silence because silence forces you to confront yourself. But when you finally sit with yourself, you uncover strengths you didn't know you had. You realize that the answers you've been chasing in other people were inside you all along. Think of solitude as a mirror. When you are alone, there is no one else to project onto, no one else to distract you, no one else to hide behind. The reflection you see is raw and honest. At first, that can be uncomfortable. You might notice your fears, your doubts, or even your regrets. But the more you sit with yourself, the more you begin to see not just the flaws, but also the beauty, the resilience, the creativity, the dreams that are still alive within you. This is the gift of being alone. It strips away the masks and reveals your truest self. When you connect with yourself in solitude, you also gain clarity about your life. How often do we make decisions based on what others expect of us? How often do we choose paths that don't align with who we are simply because we're afraid of being judged? Solitude frees you from that trap. In the quiet, you can ask yourself the most important questions. Who am I? What do I truly want? What kind of life do I deserve to live? And the answers that come are not influenced by outside pressure. They come from within. That clarity becomes the foundation for confidence, because when you know yourself, you stop needing others to define you. There is also a profound sense of peace that comes when you learn to enjoy your own company. You no longer feel desperate for constant connection or terrified of being by yourself. Instead, you become whole. And when you are whole, you don't settle for half-hearted relationships or meaningless distractions. You attract experiences and people that reflect the love and respect you found within. Being alone builds a kind of strength that cannot be shaken by the outside world. When you learn to stand in your own presence without constantly seeking approval, applause, or validation from others, you tap into a power that makes you unbreakable. Too often, people depend on external recognition to feel valuable. They want someone to notice them, to praise them, to remind them they are enough. But the truth is, as long as your worth is tied to the opinions of others, your strength will always be fragile. One harsh word, one rejection, one moment of being overlooked can break your spirit. Solitude teaches you to rise above that fragility. It teaches you that you are strong simply because you exist, because you breathe, because you are worthy without needing anyone else to confirm it. When you embrace being alone, you begin to build inner muscles. Just as the body grows stronger when it faces resistance, the soul grows stronger when it learns to stand on its own. You discover that you do not crumble when the crowd leaves. You realize that your happiness does not vanish when there is no one around to entertain you. You see clearly that the power to feel whole and fulfilled is something you carry within yourself. This realization is not just liberating, it is transformative. Because once you know that you don't need people to complete you, you stop clinging to relationships that drain you, stop compromising your values to fit in, and stop shrinking yourself to gain acceptance. Strength built in solitude shows up in how you handle challenges. When storms come, as they inevitably do, people who have not developed inner strength collapse under the weight of rejection, failure, or criticism. But those who have practiced being alone know how to steady themselves. They know how to find calm in the quiet. They know how to remind themselves of who they are without waiting for someone else to do it. This doesn't mean they never feel pain or doubt. It means they don't let those feelings define them. They can bend without breaking because their strength is rooted deep within, not in the shaky soil of external approval. Another gift of solitude is the freedom it gives you from comparison. When you spend too much time measuring your worth against others, you weaken yourself. You chase their paths, their timelines, their definitions of success, and in doing so, you lose your own. But when you are alone, you have the opportunity to focus entirely on your journey. You start to see that you are not behind anyone, you are not less than anyone, you are simply walking a different road. And in embracing that truth, you build the kind of confidence that no amount of competition can shake. Being alone also forces you to trust yourself. In the absence of constant guidance or reassurance, you learn to rely on your own judgment. You begin to trust your instincts, your decisions, your ability to handle whatever life throws your way. And the more you trust yourself, the stronger you become. You stop guessing, you stop begging for permission, and you stop needing the world to agree with your choices. That is the mark of unshakable strength, the ability to move forward with courage even when no one is clapping, no one is cheering, and no one is watching. Silence has a way of revealing what constant noise keeps hidden. When you choose to spend time alone, when you allow yourself to step into that stillness without rushing to fill it with distractions, something powerful begins to happen. Growth, healing, and creativity take root. Most people fear silence because it feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. We are so used to the endless chatter of society, the constant scrolling, the non-stop opinions, that silence feels empty. But in truth, silence is not empty, it is fertile ground. It is where the seeds of your next chapter are planted and given the space to grow. Growth often requires reflection, and reflection cannot happen when your mind is crowded with noise. In silence, you finally have the chance to review where you are, how you've been living, and where you want to go. This kind of self-awareness is impossible when you are constantly surrounded by people and opinions. Alone time gives you perspective. It allows you to see patterns in your behavior, recognize habits that hold you back, and acknowledge strengths you didn't know you had. Every breakthrough starts with an honest moment of reflection, and that moment usually comes when you are willing to sit quietly with yourself. Healing, too, requires solitude. Pain, heartbreak, betrayal, disappointment. These are wounds that cannot be healed in the presence of constant distraction. When you are alone, you give yourself the time and space to process emotions, to let yourself feel, and to release what no longer serves you. Healing does not happen overnight, and it does not happen when you pretend you are fine for the sake of others. It happens in those quiet moments when you face the truth of your pain and allow yourself to grow through it. Solitude is not about wallowing, it is about transforming. It gives you the strength to carry the lessons of your past without letting them weigh you down. Creativity thrives in silence as well. Think about the moments when your best ideas arrive. They often don't come in the middle of chaos. They come when you are walking alone, sitting quietly, or lying awake in bed. That is not a coincidence. When your mind is uncluttered, your imagination has room to breathe. When you are not overwhelmed by voices and distractions, you begin to see new possibilities, fresh solutions, and visions of what your life could be. Some of the greatest innovations, works of art, and personal breakthroughs have been born out of solitude. Creativity is not about forcing inspiration. It is about giving yourself the space to let it flow. It is easy to believe that growth, healing, and creativity are separate processes, but in truth, they are deeply connected, and all three are nurtured by silence. Growth happens because you reflect. Healing happens because you release. Creativity happens because you open your mind, and all of that is possible when you stop running from solitude and start embracing it as your ally. The world will try to convince you that being busy is the same as being productive, that being surrounded by people is the same as being fulfilled, that filling your schedule means you are living fully. But true growth does not come from constant movement. It comes from stillness. True healing does not come from avoiding your pain. It comes from facing it in silence. True creativity does not come from chasing ideas. It comes from letting them rise naturally when your mind is at peace. When you learn to embrace solitude, you also learn to protect your energy. Too often, people give away their peace in the name of connection. They surround themselves with individuals who drain them, with relationships that demand more than they give, with distractions that keep them from focusing on what truly matters. They do this because they fear being alone, because they mistake silence for emptiness, because they think that any company is better than no company at all. But the truth is, nothing costs more than giving your energy to the wrong people and the wrong places. Solitude teaches you to guard that energy like the treasure it is. Protecting your energy starts with realizing that not everyone deserves access to you. When you are constantly around people, it's easy to confuse proximity with value. Just because someone is close to you does not mean they should have influence over you. When you step back and spend time alone, you gain clarity about who lifts you up and who pulls you down. You see relationships for what they are instead of what you wish they would be. That clarity gives you the strength to let go of those who drain you and to create space for those who respect and support you. Your energy is also protected when you stop chasing distractions that add nothing to your life. The world is full of noise that pretends to be important. Endless scrolling, shallow conversations, meaningless competition. But solitude reminds you that your time and energy are limited. When you sit with yourself, you realize how much of your life you've spent pouring into things that don't feed your soul. That realization pushes you to choose better. You begin to invest in activities, projects, and people that align with your values. You stop scattering your energy and start directing it with purpose. Another way solitude protects your energy is by teaching you the power of boundaries. When you are always surrounded by people, it is easy to forget your limits. You say yes when you should say no. You agree to things that don't feel right. You sacrifice your peace just to avoid disappointing others. But when you are alone, you reconnect with yourself, and that connection reminds you that your energy is sacred. You learn that saying no is not selfish, it is necessary. You learn that rest is not laziness, it is renewal. You learn that you cannot pour into others if you are running on empty yourself. And here is the most beautiful part. When you protect your energy by embracing solitude, you naturally begin to attract people and opportunities that align with who you really are. Because when you are at peace with yourself, you no longer tolerate chaos disguised as companionship. When you value your own presence, you no longer chase people who undervalue it. When you live in alignment with your truth, you naturally draw in relationships and experiences that reflect that truth. Protecting your energy does not isolate you. It elevates you. It creates space for real connections, meaningful work, and a life that feels authentic. There is a profound shift that happens when you realize you don't have to give yourself away to be loved, respected, or accepted. You don't have to sacrifice your energy just to belong. Solitude teaches you that your energy is yours to protect, and once you take ownership of it, you stop living reactively and start living intentionally. You stop being pulled in every direction and start moving in the direction of your own purpose. There is a powerful distinction that many people fail to understand. Being alone is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness is a state of lack, a feeling of emptiness, a belief that something or someone is missing in your life. It carries with it a sense of sadness and longing. But solitude, on the other hand, is fullness. It is the realization that you are already whole, that your presence is enough, that you can find peace and strength within yourself. When you learn to separate these two experiences, you unlock a freedom that changes the way you see yourself and the way you live your life. Loneliness often comes from the belief that our worth depends on others. We feel lonely when we think we are incomplete without constant company, when we tell ourselves that being alone means being unwanted or unloved. That belief keeps people stuck in toxic relationships, in shallow friendships, in cycles of desperation that rob them of joy. But being alone is not proof of rejection. It is an opportunity for reflection. It is not a punishment, it is a privilege. When you shift your perspective from loneliness to solitude, you begin to see your own company as valuable, even sacred. Being alone teaches you that you do not have to wait for someone else to give you love, attention, or peace. You can give it to yourself. Think of it this way: if you cannot enjoy your own company, how can you expect someone else to truly enjoy it? If you cannot sit in silence without restlessness, how can you expect peace in relationships filled with noise? Solitude shows you that you are not lacking. It reminds you that happiness is not something people bring into your life. It is something you create from within. There is also a deep sense of empowerment that comes from no longer fearing time alone. When you embrace solitude, you stop settling for less just to avoid being by yourself. You stop clinging to people who mistreat you because you would rather feel lonely with them than strong without them. You stop filling your days with meaningless distractions just to escape silence. Instead, you begin to choose quality over quantity. You choose relationships that uplift rather than drain, opportunities that align with your truth rather than just keep you busy, and experiences that bring fulfillment rather than temporary escape. What many people don't realize is that the most meaningful connections you will ever have come after you embrace solitude. Why? Because once you no longer confuse being alone with being lonely, you stop approaching relationships from a place of desperation. You no longer need someone else to fill a void. Instead, you enter relationships as a whole person looking to share, not to be completed. That kind of connection is healthier, stronger, and more genuine. Solitude in this way prepares you for deeper love and more authentic connections. Loneliness drains you, but solitude fills you. Loneliness makes you dependent, but solitude makes you independent. Loneliness feels like emptiness, but solitude feels like freedom. And the shift from one to the other begins in the mind. It begins when you stop labeling your quiet moments as weakness and start recognizing them as strength. It begins when you stop telling yourself that you are alone because you lack something and start realizing you are alone because you deserve clarity, peace, and growth. So, I want you to stop running from solitude. Stop fearing the silence. Stop filling your days with people who only distract you from yourself. Instead, learn to love your own company. Sit with your thoughts. Write down your dreams. Listen to the wisdom inside you. Because when you learn to be alone, you will never again feel lonely. When you learn to stand strong in your own presence, you will attract relationships, opportunities, and experiences that align with who you really are, not who you pretend to be. Ladies and gentlemen, being alone is not a punishment. It is a privilege. It is not a weakness. It is your secret power, and once you embrace that power, nothing and no one can take it away from you.